Hello, this is Cryptolyze. I hope you are well on Tuesday, October 10, 2023. We meet today to talk about BTC, crypto, to talk macro, to talk about all that because there are a lot of things happening. On the BTC, we have structural news that is arriving, which is rather poetic. It's been a long time since we had any, at least like this. And then we will go to the prices to project the course, medium, long term, to see that there are still big signals that are being put in place. We will have to prepare and it will start right away. But first, a little reminder that the educational course is still available. It is a training course of more than 60 hours, which brings together 130 videos and 400 pages of guides in which you can learn blockchain, everything related to crypto, investment, technical analysis, and of course, trading through videos. A course that helps you with quizzes, with all this information, so it's free, made available from the moment you get financed. Using our partner. Everything is explained in the description and in the comments, and we immediately attack the news with here what fell yesterday. So there is a white paper which fell called BitVM paper, and which overall brings a smart contract a little to the Ethereum on BTC. And there we have something which is quite interesting. I admit to having read it in length and width currently. And what is interesting to see is that the idea is to propose a Turing machine, which really allows you to execute snippets of code and actually validate snippets of code on Bitcoin. This is the principle. It is not to execute the pieces of code on Bitcoin, but to validate the end, the finality of the mathematical functions which are proposed in the smart contracts on Bitcoin. And this is really the very principle, and it is rather well done, in which they are directly copying Optimist Rollup. Therefore, the same principle that we found on OP or on, for example, Arbitrum, with the possibility of being able to denounce transactions subsequently. And this is good because we already have the notion of being able to apply this schema to fairly simple games, such as, for example, chess or Go, or even why not poker. And on this, the reaction of the community is rather positive because we have people who are impressed by what is happening, by what is being implemented. And there are others who are even against it, but who are not resistant to the idea. They say, that's it, don't get excited, we're staying in the abstract. Except that, yes, on GitHub, there is still a deep concept that works in the idea. So that means that we can, in fact, have something that could make it possible to really structure effective EVMs, whereas they will not be directly on BTC. That is to say that it will be the purpose, which will be on BTC, therefore implying a form of layer 2, which will be structured around that. But in any case, what is interesting to see, and this is what is noted in this post, is that we still have a lot of things happening on Ethereum on 2023. We have the ordinals, we have the notion of BitVM, and therefore we have the functional development stack that is being built around Bitcoin. And it's been a long time since we had that. We had projects like RVB, which are having a lot of difficulty being able to structure themselves because it's something that is heavy. And what is important is that the code in the project that is proposed, there is no need to really do a soft fork. So that means that there is no need to fork anything. You can instantiate it directly on Bitcoin precisely. And that's the interest there is in relation to that. And yes, there are a lot of things happening at the BTC level. The person doesn't just stop at the development. He talks about the fact that there is the ETF, there is the halving, which is in progress. Happening, there is the notion of Hashrati, which is completely exploding and which is true, which is totally true. And on the side, we have countries which are totally launching into mining, and this which is also true. So we really still have a boom in BTC that is starting to take off, whereas normally Bitcoin is supposed to be something that is validated over time, something that ossifies. The notion of ossification of Bitcoin as a currency, as a digital asset was very important. That is to say the fact that the code did not move and that it had a use in retaining structural value and it had a monetary utility. This is really the principle of Bitcoin, and there we see that we have things that are being grafted around it, and it's interesting to see how the community reacts. On ordinals, we really have a separation from the community, whether on ordinals itself or all the structural NFC projects which are directly on Bitcoin, and on the side, we rather have something which is positive in terms of welcome. It's still very new. I'm telling you about something that came out yesterday, but we are in something that is really interesting, and I think that we will have to follow and dig into the reaction of Bitcoiners to see what the support will be for this type of project, because it is really important. Especially when we look, we also have allegations such as, for example, Fidelity, a very large investment fund which weighs $5 billion, and which has requested a spot BTC ETF, which defines that Bitcoin is the safest, most decentralized, strongest digital currency compared to any other digital asset. So we are really in an affirmation of what Bitcoin is. And what is interesting is that we are affirming what Bitcoin is, and at the same time, we are developing the potential of Bitcoin, and that is extremely positive. And on this, we are going to take a little detour later towards the notion of dominance of BTC, because we could project ourselves onto a world where we would have a takeover of dominance of BTC, no longer in the form of value, but in the form of usefulness. And it will be a little. At the end of this video, we will close on it. In any case, we should have a little bit of news soon with the SEC, which should at some point define in relation to the lawsuit it has against Grayscale, whether or not it will appeal and in what way, in any case, they will position themselves. We should have feedback which should be positive for Grayscale. Don't forget what I talked to you about yesterday. Indeed, we have the GBTC premium, therefore the Grayscale trust, which is in the process of diminishing precisely because we are waiting for a decision. And in any case, it's been a long time since I told you that there was a good chance that Grayscale would transform directly into an ETF, regardless of what happened, and that there was little chance that the trust would be broken up directly, and that inevitably we would go through a form of ETF, even if it will take time. And what is interesting to see is that we still had quite a few movements, even though we had absolutely nothing in terms of news, apart from obviously the war between Hamas and Israel. So with the tensions which are also between Israel and Iran, and inevitably Iran and Saudi Arabia. But we have this pole, we will say politics, which is very strong, which has a lot of impact on crypto and especially macro. Not necessarily as we think, we will go and see later, but we do not have big news again. The big news arrives tomorrow and arrives Thursday. Okay, we arrive Wednesday and Thursday, so we still have a lot of perspective to have. I think that today we will still be in the preparation clearly of the minute of the Fed, although it is especially the preparation of the CPI, which will arrive on this. It will be really important. Obviously, it is inflation in which oil plays a role and in which the news plays a massive role of agreement. There we have a big acceleration with the gap breaking. We see that we closed higher, but we did not reach our retest objective here at 87, 88. We are going to say dollars, and we did not go to retest. Fill in any case this gap there. So that means that here we still have quite a few things that are being played out despite the communications that we find in particular on Bloomberg, in which we mainly have the war, which is highlighted. We have on the side this real notion of tension in the Middle East, which is playing on oil. And yet we have oil that cannot grow, okay? It's interesting. It's really interesting to see. I really expected to see oil growing very strongly. But when I say very strongly, it's with a rupture here from 95. While there was still a real declaration of war by Israel, but we have not yet seen an increase in tensions. For the moment, we are preparing for an increase in tensions, but I think the market is pricing it. Unless we have something going out of control, we will in fact certainly have an establishment of a range in oil, or even a bearish breakout. And I'm not sure that we're going to retest that, although I want to tell you that I'm still going to grade it, and we're going to leave it here for retest, because it's very likely that we have this little retest that is effective. Hop, and I didn't put it correctly. We're just going to take a little bit of time to be able to do it. It's here in style, tack, orange, and off we go. And we're going to put the text in the center, in which we have our retest, which we will have to wait for. I think it is possible that we will have an acceleration too. Is this going to be decisive? I want to tell you yes. Inflation and oil will be decisive. The two are linked, intrinsically linked. So if we ever maintain a bearish trend here, that implies that we are also keeping inflation low, and therefore we accept the fact that we are going to have a drop in rates, which should happen Q1 2024, and therefore that we will not have rate increase. This year, this is a bit of what is being priced on the traditional markets because we see that we have a stabilization. What is happening? Yesterday, we pushed very well. We didn't have the oil, which flew away. And as a result, this instability in the Middle East leads to an acceleration of the S&P 500, in which we went to seek these levels, and we are slowly getting our retest, which is rather classic. Whereas on the other hand, we have the bounds, which are still very low, but which are in the process of being swallowed up. So we have here a figure which is in the process of being produced. It is not managing to stay in this dynamic with potentially a TTL, which goes back above, which consolidates here, which starts to rise again with next an SPF 500, which overall will go into this dynamic to retest here to create continuity. We would be in something which would be relatively healthy in terms of structure, and therefore we would avoid the bond crisis with behind it a continuity of the retracement of the SP 500 with a breadth which would be rather classic and positive. But has BTC followed the SP 500? I think you're starting to get used to it. No, absolutely not. Yesterday we closed in the red, in which we have a bearish acceleration. What is interesting is that we are here in a classic work of Kumo on Ichimoku. We went to retest and then leave. We have a target here at 28,560, which is the very strong solid in which we have a consolidation a little below at 28,475 at the level of the Kumo. First solid, second solid, keynoted, near flat, second to flat. So for me, it would be rather dynamic to do something like that, to make a bearish continuity when we base ourselves solely on Ichimoku. And this is where it is interesting to always compare our vision a little, because we are on Ichimoku, which is found here on the CME, therefore the future contracts of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So something classic. But when we move towards the total index, which takes up all the movements, we see here, and this time still in flow, that we are no longer in a phase of retesting here classic. Yes, we have an acceleration. We are partly on the decline. And what are we retesting? The classic top of the range, so there we have nothing new, and the bullish acceleration that we had. We did part of the retest. We see that we accelerated and fell. We had a rejection which was very strong with this really powerful wick. And what is interesting to see is really this very strong notion that you have at the moment, is that I see a lot in the comments at the moment in me saying, but suddenly we're going to 28,000. So we're no longer shooting at 20,000, 23,000. We're no longer breaking 25,000. In fact, we have to understand that there, especially if we zoom out, take into account that we is in a range. In fact, we are in this phase of lethargy that I have been talking to you about for some time. The goal of the lethargy phase is to create uncertainty. It is something that goes neither up nor down. We are not in flux. We go from range to range in lateralization of lateralization, and it is all. So we shouldn't think about having a breakup, and it's not because we have in mind the breakup of 25,000 that it will happen tomorrow. The notion of temporality is really very present. I feel a lot of people are lost in those moments, but it's logical. That's what you should feel. That's what we're trying to make you feel. So don't be confused by this. Just take it into consideration. That the market currently is not a flow market, is a range market. We do not have flow. We do not have volatility. We do not have the liquidity necessary to be able to start again. So we pass from one range to another. Here currently we have left the range. We are testing reintegration, but we cannot re-enter the upper range and we cannot re-enter the lower range. So it is even possible that we create a new range here in this area before having a resolution that it is bearish or bullish. And again, the bullish or bearish resolution is just to re-enter either the bottom range or the top range. But all in all, as long as we stay in this big range that is here, it doesn't change anything. The flows are not launched. There is nothing. So take a step back from that. Be careful. Don't be in a washing machine where you are going to be rinsed in any case, downwards or upwards, because it is exactly what there is being to happen here. This is exactly the goal of this type of lateralization. And take into account that the notion of temporality is something that can happen tomorrow, or why not in 3 months? Again, this is something that is uncontrollable and market-driven. We know how to read the structures, we know how to read the areas in which we're going to intervene, but we do not know how to read the future. We do not know how to read what the course will do tomorrow. We're just going to look at what we have, the little indications that are being made at the level of the order flow. I've been telling you for some time that it was flat, it was slow, it was boring. Overall, there was nothing happening. There's not much happening either, but in this case, we still have small movements in which we still have this upward curve that we've seen since we had the bearish breakout. So small upward curve in structural 4 hours, which is rather interesting. And here we see that the open interest is also in the process of being structured. So that is given. So here we are in the process of supporting the price at the level of the open interest. We don't have something that is flat. Of course, we are still relatively flat, but we still have something that is in the process of being put in place. And above all, what interests me is here at the level of the top trader. We have had the breakout on the small bearish part that we had here. So we are just going to spend an hour to clearly see the bearish breakout. This bearish breakout led to a buyback at the level of the agreement positions. We have a really small movement on the other hand. We don't act crazy. We went from 52.2 to overall 53.2. We took 1 point at the long level, which is quite weak. But what is interesting to see is that we took 1 point while we had a price which was falling. The goal is that we certainly bought back this part to retest a little higher. And therefore, in the short term, what do we see? We don't forget that we are still in a retest phase between two ranges, rather classic, in which we went to get rejected at 28,600. We got rejected here at 27,000, which is the top of the range with small attempts to seek liquidity here in a big resistance zone. But for me, we are still in this dynamic to potentially go further down to break this area, okay? So if we break 27,100, 27,250, exactly up to 27,000, in which we break this area, clearly it's back to 26,000. And therefore that implies that we reintegrate here. All low ranges, okay? And so there we would generally have gone to look for the 25,000 and then go back to test the 26,800. And there we would again make a return from the bearish range. But for me, we are in this dynamic there, in this zone there, despite the fact that we have a construction at the order flow level, which is rather long. For me, it is not yet marked enough. We would have to have a rupture here of 54% to say that we would be in a dynamic of redemption. And it is possible that this will happen if we ever retest the low part here, that we will liquidate part of these lows there, because there we have still created a lot of liquidity. When we summarize, we reflect that with liquidity, we especially see a lot of liquidity, which is expected. 1, 2, 3, okay? This low there did not seek this liquidity here, and the same here, this candle did not seek this liquidity. So overall, what is happening is that we have created liquidity in this area, and that at some point we will have to go and get it and therefore make a bearish acceleration. And we see that we has a pattern that could be put in place like that. To recover that, it's a minimum, and then we'll see if it's just a candle that gets knocked down and then starts to rise again, and therefore have a schematic of short squeeze, which would be done subsequently. Why not? Or simply something that breaks bearish with a big candle. And there we will see it anyway in all cases. What we want to have is to have here an acceptance either below a retest and a breakout. Either, I will clean up just a little bit for you, but either we wait for a breakout, acceptance, and a bearish continuity, or we wait for a bearish acceleration, redemption, reacceptance above, and then we go upwards. There we will have a signal which will be rather bullish. There we will have a signal which will be rather bearish. And that is what we will concentrate on in the coming days, because I think it is possible that it will not be today, but whether in fact at the level of inflation or at the level of the future of the Fed. We're going to finish for today. I hope you liked this video. If so, don't forget to leave me a like and a comment. It always makes me very happy and it supports the work I do. And we meet at 13:30 to talk about CRO, crypto.com, and it's at 13:30.